Good morning. Thank you all for joining us this morning. This is the new normal. Typically, we would have an in-person press conference, but under the circumstances, this is the best alternative. But thank you for being here. My name is Irwin Zalkin. It's spelled I-R-W-I-N. The last name is Z like zebra, A-L-K-I-N. I am the senior partner of the Zalkin Law Firm. We are located in San Diego, California, and we have offices in New York and Colorado. With me today is Peter Janci, attorney Peter Janci, J-A-N-C-I. Peter is with the law firm of Crew Janci, located in Portland, Oregon, and also Robert Jones, one of our clients. And this morning, Robert Jones, who is 60 years old, George Angel, who is 56 years old, and Richard, whose last name I'm not going to use this morning, but you have a copy of the complaint. You should have a copy of the complaint, who is 54 years old, filed a very public civil lawsuit for childhood sexual abuse they all encountered and suffered at the hands of Dr. Edward Himeno, a child psychiatrist who was actually, and in reality, a serial sexual predator. That lawsuit is against Loma Linda University Medical Center, Loma Linda University, and the Seventh-day Adventists that run and operate those institutions. They have tremendous courage to use their names and go public with what had happened to them as children. And they've done so that others who have suffered similar circumstances at the hands of this Dr. Himeno will know that they're not alone. I'd like to take you through, and they've brought this lawsuit because under legislation that California passed this last year in 2019, AB 218, that opens a 3-year window of opportunity for older victims of childhood sexual abuse to be able to seek redress and justice in our civil justice system for what happened to them as children, and whose claims were barred by earlier statutes of limitations. That law was signed by Governor Newsom, thankfully, on October 13, 2019. Now, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about what happened to each of these men at the hands of Dr. Himeno, and then Mr. Janci, Peter Janci, will talk to you about Himeno and his history. And then we'll have Robert say a few words, offer you some thoughts and feelings of what he's experienced and what he's going through as a victim, as a survivor. And then we'll open up, or we'll respond to your questions through the chat system on the Zoom. Robert Jones was sexually assaulted, and it really was assault, by Dr. Himeno at 3 different times in his life. In approximately 1971 or 1972, when he was 11 or 12 years old, his mother took him to see Himeno to get help dealing with a very abusive father. Instead, Himeno groomed Robert into becoming his sex toy. He would take him to football games, to lunch, and other activities as a way of grooming him, gaining his trust and his friendship. He would take him to his beach house in Newport Beach, and that's where the abuse actually started. Under the guise and the lie that he told Robert's mother that there were going to be a group of boys spending the weekend, Robert was allowed to go to the beach house. And when he got to the beach house, there were no other boys. It was just he and Himeno. And Himeno, at that point, sexually abused Robert. And that sexual abuse was of the most extreme kind. He was sodomized. He was forced to orally copulate Himeno. And this went on for over a year. Now, Himeno was a very flamboyant guy. He was charming. And people and boys, especially that he treated, that he got to know, that he got to befriend, were attracted to him as a person, not just as from sex. And later on in Robert's life, when he was about 16 or 17, he went to Dr. Himeno to borrow his Porsche so that he, Robert, could impress a young lady and take her to the prom in a fancy car. Himeno was agreeable, but there was a price to be paid. And that price was for Robert to give him sex. As Robert got older, into his late teens and early adulthood, life became very, very hard for him, as is the case for children who are sexually abused. It derails their normal development. Robert was angry. He was ashamed. He turned to drugs to bury that pain that lingers in most sexual abuse victims. He had financial troubles. And again, he went to Himeno. And Himeno introduced him to a life of sex for money, sex for hire. Himeno even introduced Robert to another physician at Loma Linda University Medical Center to set up what was supposed to be a sex tour trip. That didn't happen, but it came close. And Robert was introduced by Himeno to a porno studio where on one occasion, Robert and another man were filmed naked while wrestling. George Angel was born in 1964. In approximately 1973, when George was about 9 years old, he started treatment with Himeno at Loma Linda Medical Center. Himeno immediately started grooming George by having him draw pictures of naked men and naked women. It didn't take long before Himeno had George start giving him oral sex. Himeno would sodomize George in his office at the medical center, where George would scream in pain as a receptionist stationed just outside Himeno's door sat and did nothing. Himeno would take George to his Newport Beach house, where a male medical intern from Loma Linda would spend the weekends with both of them, while Himeno would take George into Himeno's bedroom and sodomize him and engage in oral copulation with him, while the intern never said a word. On another occasion, Himeno and another Loma Linda doctor took George to Disneyland. At some point, George got angry with Himeno and yelled in front of the other doctor, "No more BJs for you." Hearing this, the doctor did nothing. Himeno sexually abused George on scores of occasions over 2 or so years. Richard was born in 1966. When Richard was about 7 or 8, he began seeing Dr. Himeno for therapy. Himeno groomed Richard by taking him out to McDonald's or shooting plastic darts, which is something Richard liked to do. During one therapy session, Dr. Himeno asked Richard to draw a naked picture of his mother. Himeno sexually abused Richard on approximately 3 occasions that Richard can remember. Himeno would instruct Richard to take off his shirt and would then point and comment about Richard's nipples and his belly button. Himeno would then point towards Richard's penis and ask, "Ooh, what is that? Let me see. Pull your pants down." Himeno would then fondle Richard's exposed genitals. I'm going to turn this over to Peter, and Peter's going to tell you about Himeno and his history.
Thank you, Erwin. Well, I think what we want to highlight for everyone is just the length and breadth of Dr. Himeno's access to children. Our investigation shows, and we intend to prove, that Dr. Himeno was affiliated with Loma Linda University and its medical center in various capacities for almost 30 years. He began there in the 50s as a medical student, and he continued his affiliation with Loma Linda. He eventually became a psychiatrist, a child psychiatrist with Loma Linda Medical Center. He worked in that capacity from the 1960s until the early 1980s. And at one point, he became the director of all child psychiatry at Loma Linda University. He also served as an associate professor at Loma Linda Medical School. And Dr. Himeno's credentials and his affiliation with Loma Linda also allowed him to have access to boys and child patients in other settings. At various times during his career, Dr. Himeno was affiliated with Los Angeles County and USC Medical Center, which is formerly known as Los Angeles County General Hospital. Himeno was also eventually associated and was the director of child psychiatry at the Inpatient Treatment Center at Riverside General Hospital. And in addition to these hospitals, his credentials and the esteem with which Loma Linda held him out allowed him to become involved with nonprofit organizations that served boys, including a group called Mercy, Mentally and Emotionally Retarded Children, Inc., which was a treatment organization for developmentally disabled children. So what we see is a 30-year history of a child psychiatrist who had unbelievable access to boys. And we are very proud of our clients for speaking up about this horrendous abuse that they suffered. And we believe that these clients in today's lawsuit are just the tip of the iceberg. We believe that it's very likely that there are many other victims, because as a child psychiatrist, Himeno had access to and was targeting the most vulnerable boys he knew needed help, boys who were there for treatment. And so as you'll see on your screen, we've detailed a lot of Himeno's history and a lot of information about Himeno and his access to boys at a website, www.drhimeno.com. And that'll be in your press materials. And we encourage you to visit that to learn more about Dr. Himeno and his access to boys.
Thank you, Peter. At this point, we would like Robert to say a few words, and Bernie, if you can pull up the slide that we have with Robert.
Hello, my name is Robert Jones. I was asked to speak, give a statement on the abuse I suffered at the hands of Dr. Himeno. And this is the First time I've ever spoke publicly about this. And even though these thoughts and emotions have run through my head for 50 years, this will be the first time speaking in public. I was taken to see Dr. Himeno when I was 11 years old because my mom realized I was out of control. With fits of rage and anger, I was acting out at home and at school, brought on by years of physical, verbal, and mental abuse by my father, who had walked out of our home a year earlier. Right away, within the first few weeks, Dr. Himeno and I hit it off, and I enjoyed spending time with him. It seemed like all the things that I liked, he enjoyed as well. Putting together models, playing board games, Chinese checkers, and the like. He was into sports. My favorite as well as his was football. In my mind, he was the father figure that I'd always wanted. I just loved spending time with this man. It was then, after what I know now was 3 months of grooming, I was asked, as well as my mom, if I could go spend a weekend at his home in Newport Beach, California. We were told other kids were coming down for some fun at the ocean, which he knew that I loved. I was so totally excited. And my mom agreed. It sounded like a real fun time that I was going to be a part of. I was to be dropped off at his home at a specific time on a Saturday morning. When we arrived that Saturday morning, my mom, who was always on time, realized there was no one else there. She asked Dr. Himeno, where are the other kids? When are they coming? He said, I'm so sorry, I told you the wrong time. The others will be here in an hour. It's fine, leave him here with me and I can show him around, it'll be good. With complete faith and trust, Mom left me alone with the doctor. After my many questions about the others coming, the hour had passed and it was clear in my mind no one else is going to show up. Shortly into the second hour, to ease my anxiousness to see the ocean, he said, let's go down to the beach. My swim trunks were already on. He said, let me grab a towel and some sunscreen, which he did. And before heading out the door, he said, why don't you take off your shirt and let me put sunscreen on you? Started with me standing as he began to apply the sunscreen. Then I was told this would be easier if I would lay down on the futon mattress by the door, which I did. And we never made it to the beach that day. That Saturday morning was the start of what would be the most fear-filled, painfully excruciating, and exhausting 2 days of my young life that have been replayed in my mind for the past 50 years. And that's just the first 2 days. The nightmare continued every week in his office. This abuse and extreme grooming by a known, learned, highly educated psychological professor flipped my world upside down. Never be that free, young, clean kid again. I now carried an ugly stain I had to hide. And I had to hide this the rest of my life, knowing in my mind, this is bad. I'm bad. I could have stopped this. What has happened to me is disgusting, and I'm disgusting. No one can know, so I carried this thought through my life, never to trust anyone with my heart again, especially men. I can never speak of this. This is what I must live with. It cannot be found out. So for this reason, for the reason why am I doing something about this now? Well, because at this stage in my life, I've come to realize that the young boy who for all these years never had a voice is finally able to have one and to speak about what has happened to me. All my life, I have dealt with the effects of these internal demons, both mentally and physically. They have taken a toll on all of my relationships, from family, friends, wife, ex-wives, and also my children. From the pain, shame, and guilt that I once carried of the never-ending memories that play over and over in my mind, which has kept me seeking some kind of comfort and peace that was only found through an array of multiple addictions that ended up slowly destroying everything and everyone I ever loved and cared about in my life. And now where I find myself at this point in my life, I'm finally getting a voice and on the path of healing. And this is part of the process.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you very much. We have some questions. Peter, do you have any questions?
We don't have any up now, so that folks know the Q&A box is open at the bottom of your screen. You're welcome to send any questions that you have now for Robert or the attorneys. We do have a question, Erwin. Why is Robert coming forward now?
Well, I'm going to let Robert answer that, but let me just, for the sake of those who don't really understand what happens here to child sexual abuse victims, most victims never even report to nobody. They take this to their grave. It's very, very hard for them. And I think for many, as they get older and they get more mature, they start to feel that they are now able to talk about what happened to them. They're able to confront what happened to them. And I think with the change in the law, that may have helped Robert too, or given him some courage to come forward. But I'm going to let Robert answer that question. Robert, can you answer that? Why now?
Why now? It's really a three-part answer for me when I think about the question. The first part, the first stage of my life when I was young and this happened to me, the extreme shame and guilt because my mom has taken me to see somebody for help, and also because the way this doctor toyed with my mind, you know, I saw him as a father figure, somebody I loved, somebody I didn't want to get in trouble because in my mind, he cared about me and cared for me. The second stage would be the shame and guilt stage that as a teenager, popular kid in high school, popular in sports and athletics, the shame and guilt of being found out that you had contact with another man, and this is back in the 70s, that would have ruined my reputation and killed me, so I said nothing. And then the third part answer is, by the time I really felt like I needed to be heard, I needed to tell somebody, it was too late. Statute of limitations was gone. The reason I wanted to come forward because I knew there had to be others and other people knew about this, but it was too late. So that's my answer.
Thank you, Robert. We have another question is, why is Loma Linda Medical Center liable for this doctor who died years ago? Peter,
Sure.
you want to take this one or should I take it?
No, I'm happy to address that. Well, Loma Linda Medical Center was the employer and supervisor for Dr. Himeno during the abuse that he perpetrated on our clients. He used his position and the facilities even to accomplish his abuse of these boys. And our investigation has already uncovered evidence, and we believe that we're going to prove in this case that there were multiple points along the way where other staff and administrators at Loma Linda were aware of information, red flags about Dr. Himeno, and that they failed to take action to intervene, and they failed to take action to protect boys. And so that's why Loma Linda is responsible for their employee, Dr. Edward Himeno. And the Seventh-day Adventist Church is a party to this case because the Seventh-day Adventist Church owns and operates Loma Linda University and its medical center.
Also, from the evidence we've uncovered so far, Dr. Himeno was pretty open and notorious with his affiliation with young boys. And it doesn't take a lot to understand and to recognize that when an adult is spending such an amount of time with young kids, is a sort of the Pied Piper, if you will, of young boys, that's a huge red flag. And that was true in the 1970s, is true today. And given the people around Himeno who were employed by Loma Linda, the intern, the receptionist, the other doctors who saw him or heard what was happening and didn't report that as they should have, which would have been an employment responsibility to report that information. I think that supports the liability as well.
There's another question here, Erwin, about, have other victims come forward and what should victims do? I'll touch on that. Maybe you can follow up. We are aware that there are other victims, and we believe that there are likely many other victims. When you look at the famous cases of doctors in their position of trust to abuse children, whether that's Larry Nassar and USA Gymnastics, or Reginald Archibald and Rockefeller University, these doctors have a profound trust, and they have really unfettered access to kids, and they have access behind closed examining doors and therapy doors. And so we believe there are likely other victims, and we encourage other victims to come forward to get help. And we certainly welcome all witnesses and all information who can contact us through the contact information at the Dr. Himeno website, drhimeno.com. Erwin, do you want to add to that?
No, I think that's been addressed. There's another question. If this doctor concealed this activity, how could Loma Linda ever have known about it? Well, the problem is that he didn't really conceal his activities. He was very brazen about his activities with small kids. And the fact that there were, again, as I said earlier, other Loma Linda employees, including physicians, who knew that he was with these young kids, that in the instance of the receptionist or secretary who was situated right outside his door, when George was screaming of pain and did nothing, excuse me, or the intern at who was an intern at Loma Linda and was, as we understand it, in some way assigned to Dr. Himeno, who was at the Newport Beach house. And I mean, he's taking this kid into the bedroom and he doesn't tell anybody. That under the law in California, as well as most states, if an employee has that kind of information, and that's going to be imputed to the employer, because they probably have a reporting responsibility to let their employer know this doctor is doing stuff that's just not appropriate with kids. How can the media contact you later for follow-up questions? And in the media release that we've given, there should be our phone numbers, and you have our cell phone numbers in the media advisory, I believe. So feel free, if you have any further questions or something you want to discuss with us after this conference, we'll be available to do that. The numbers on the screen, I believe, are our office numbers. And although our offices are closed, the phones are being forwarded to us. So if you, in my case, if you call our office and you just go to my extension, I will receive that call.
Yeah, same here.
Are there any other questions? I see something else. That looks like that's about it. Is anyone have any other questions? All right, so we're gonna sign off. Thank you for being here with us, and we appreciate your attendance and your